It's a blessing to welcome on one of the top returning players from last year's Cincinnati team. He will now be entering his sophomore campaign, and that's Mason Madsen. How you doing, man?
I'm well. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, man. Well, I know it's been a hectic summer and springtime for you. Obviously, you didn't really do too much change in the year, right back where you were freshman season at Cincinnati. So how you feeling
For
right
sure.
now?
I feel good. I think for a while there was a period of time where I probably felt a little anxious, just because I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, I guess, this upcoming year. And I went in the portal for a little bit just because we had a coaching change and we had to go through all that. But it's definitely a relief to be back where I am, because there's definitely there's beauty in being somewhere kind of for years in a row and being able to build something with the people you like doing it with. And so I just, like, part of the reason I came back is just I love my teammates. And so I'm excited to be back with them. And obviously we've been working these past couple of weeks, so it's good to see everyone again. And to recharge over the spring was definitely much needed after that long COVID season.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to get into obviously the upcoming team and even a lot more Cincinnati stuff in a little bit, but I want to go through a journey that's got you to this point. So if we head all the way back now, you're originally born in Wisconsin. So take us through that. Like, what was it like growing up out there?
For sure. I think like a big part of me growing up was the fact that I had a twin. I guess I have a twin. I didn't have him. I still have him. Um, but obviously, so he was here last year and now he's in Utah. But growing up, it's like we were together every day. And obviously, like, that's kind of what made me who I am as a player, and I think as a person too. So I have an older sister too, and then both my parents are in the picture. And so just growing up, my dad was my high school coach and kind of coached me all the way up youth too. And it's hard. Like, growing up in Wisconsin, it's like not a huge basketball hotbed. Obviously, there's, like, recently there's been some good players. Tyler Hero, probably the most notable, to come out of Wisconsin. But, like, even the part I was from, like Northwest, it's like that's not, especially not a basketball hotbed, right? So, which I'm from, like, Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, which is like an hour and a half from Minneapolis. But I think, like, obviously it kind of made me who I am just because I had to work really hard to get. It's not like I'm at this big prep school. And I think the more I'm around the college game, the more I realize, like, that's what most people do. Or maybe not most, but a lot of people, you
Mhm.
know? So I think it was kind of hard to gain a little traction at that point. And then um, obviously you're probably going to get into Minnesota too. But when I moved to Minnesota my sophomore year, I think that was the first time I was really exposed to, like, high level basketball for periods of time, which obviously is not completely different, but there's definitely the area I was in, Rochester. There are lots of good players, and probably the most notable there was Matthew Hurt, who's probably going to be a first or second round pick this year. So, yeah, my journey's been a little different than most people, but it's definitely made me who I am.
Now, there's a couple stops between your point from moving from Wisconsin to Minnesota, and one of that was about fifth grade. Your family decides obviously to go out there to China for a year. Take us through all that. Like, that's not something too many people do, but walk us through that and what led to that.
Yeah, it's strange because like people. I just had someone ask me the other day, like, were your parents in the military? And I'm like, no, my parents are both teachers, and they just always talked about teaching abroad and having that experience. And it's something I wouldn't change or trade for anything, just because it's, like you said, like, not many people have that experience.
Mhm.
And so I think that more so, like, made me who I am, because it's when I started playing basketball. Just because, so, like, we're there and we went to, like, this boarding school that, like, when they sold it to us and we decided, so it was in Guangzhou, China, which is like 20 million people. And they sold it as, like, an international school where, like, everyone speaks English, all of this, and that's not the case at all. Like, we had, like, one English class that was taught in English, everything else was in Chinese. So when we were there, we just kind of, and another thing you need to know about the Chinese culture is, like, they take, like, a 2 hour nap during the middle of the day,
Mhm.
which is, like, it's common in other, like, I know Spain is like that, like, they take a siesta.
Mhm.
But so everything kind of shuts down from 12 to 2, and obviously we're not used to that, you know. So it took about a month before we finally were, like, my mom's like, hey, you guys just you can't be in the house, just get out of the house, go do something. So that's when I started hooping, because the school we were at had, like, 24 outdoor basketball courts, which basketball is huge in China, something I didn't know. And I think I've grown to know more now, just having experienced it and even been around the game now. Like people know that like basketball is big in China. And so that's when we started hooping. So at that point, it was me, my brother, and my sister. And my sister she fizzled out a little bit when she got to high school, but me and Gabe kept going. But that's where it kind of started. So we started working out in China.
And when you guys first got out there, just culturally adjusting, because you're still only in fifth grade, like you're not too old where obviously you haven't really got 100% used to just growing up in America type level yet. So
For sure.
how did you just like get culturally involved? 'Cause obviously there's a lot of different cultures being in different countries, especially somewhere like China. So how did you adjust to that?
I think the biggest thing for me was just adjusting to being like the minority for the first time ever. You know, like you look at me, like I'm part of the majority in the US. And so I think that part was a little eye-opening just because I like experienced, and it's not like I was discriminated against really, but it's just like when people are staring at you constantly or asking you to take pictures just because you're white, like that was really weird. And it's the only time I've experienced that. But I think it made me more conscious of kind of what some people may experience and maybe a little more empathetic toward those people. But yeah, it was definitely a huge adjustment, you know. And like you said, being in fifth grade, like you're still figuring stuff, like I'm still figuring stuff out now, right? But yeah, fifth grade, I think part of it probably made me grow up a little bit, but it definitely set me up for the long term for sure.
What would you say is the funniest memory you remember back from your time out there?
Funniest memory. It's a good question. Put me on the spot a little bit. I think, oh man, there's a couple. My mom has some good ones. Just okay. I don't know if this is the funniest, but it's pretty funny. So like my mom isn't like the most outgoing person, but in China she was a kindergarten teacher, and so all the other kindergarten teachers were Chinese, except for her, and so like she kind of dove headfirst into all like the customs that it's hard to explain, but like so they would have it happened a couple times throughout the year where she would have to dress up in these little dresses and dance with the teachers and with the kids. So it's just it might have been a had to be there moment, but like remembering it's just kind of funny to think back on. But yeah, there are so many things that I could go into just because like it was just different too because the kids were there 24/7. Like kids would go home. Some kids would go home on Saturday and Sunday, but otherwise people are there all the time. So there's a lot of stuff that went on.
So was that always the plan to stay there for 1 year? Or did you guys decide to come back earlier, or just what kind of led you guys ultimately coming back to America then?
Yeah, so my parents always talked about going 1 year, but the hard thing about going, and it kind of limited our options because it wasn't always like we're going to China. So my dad's a Spanish teacher, so for a while it was going to be Spain or Mexico, somewhere abroad that like he could at least speak the language because it's hard to go somewhere and not know the language at all. But like the most places that you go abroad are like 2-year contracts, especially for teachers. So it was hard to find a place for 1 year. But that's kind of all they wanted to do. They just saw it as a perfect time. So my brother and I were in 5th grade, and then my sister was in 7th grade. So it's like we weren't too old where we're going to be missing out on too much back home, but we still get that experience that we'll remember, which I think, like thinking back on it, it's probably the perfect time, you know? And it's funny, like I remember all the way back in 2nd grade, like hearing about it for the first time, like just having breakfast with my dad, and he sits us down and like, how would you guys feel about living abroad? I'd like, what does abroad mean? You know, at that point, like you don't know what that means. But yeah, I think for them, they always anticipated 1 year. And so that's what ended up happening.
Obviously, it's still going to be quite a few years away for you, but that day does come. You ultimately do have kids. Is that something you'd be interested in, possibly taking them out to another country? I mean, you might be playing professional overseas, who knows at that point, but
for sure.
Is that something you'd even have interest in doing someday for your kids?
I think my answer would be absolutely, just because I like having gone through it, knowing the benefits you reap from it, especially it's stuff you don't even know. Like it might be subconscious at some points, but like I realized like now it benefited me, you know? And I think there are just so many other places out there. I think it'd be a little silly not to like want to see more or experience more, you know? So whether that actually happens in the future, I'll have to see. But I think right now, like if I could answer that question, I would say that'd be like a yes. I definitely want my kids to experience that.
You guys come back home then to Wisconsin, and like you said, you started picking up basketball out there in China. So when you came to America, then like when did you start really going at this heavily? When did you truly start feeling like basketball is the sport I really want to pursue now?
Yeah, I think so I didn't play an actual game until 6th grade, which would be the year after we went to China. But by that point, so it's weird because like obviously we're around the game. Like I grew up like a decent athlete, but it's not like I was crazy. And then just that year of skill work, like I think I always used to feel behind a little bit just because I hadn't started or like now you see like all of these mixtapes, first, second grade hoopers or first, and you're like, man, wow. And I remember back like in 6th grade, like the big name was Shamar Morrow. Like I don't know if you know that name, but like 6th grade dunker. I'm like, man, I'm way behind. But I think like seeing all that stuff, and I think the love definitely came in 5th grade. Like that's when it started because we just started working out a lot. And then when I played my first game in 6th grade, I think I really started to like it more just because like I could see what that work could do, just having never stepped on the basketball court. And then already probably in 6th grade being the best player on the floor most of the time, or one of the two with Gabe. But yeah, I think 6th grade. And then like if I could pick another year where I think things changed a lot for me, it would probably be going into my sophomore year, just because I feel like my game changed a lot. Having gone from that's when we moved from Wisconsin to Minnesota, and there were just more resources when we were in Minnesota as far as trainers went, working with my guy Dino. And I feel like my game started elevating more exponentially at that point. And then, yeah, things kind of took off from there a little bit more. But
did you and Gabe both first start playing at the same time out there in China, or did you guys kind of separate in terms of a little bit of gap between when you guys first started playing, or was that like right on time with both you guys?
yeah, no, the same time, just because it was easy at that point, just like having someone to work out with all the time. Still, like now, it's like it's a little hard now not having someone like that. Obviously, I have different people now, but just when I was younger, it's someone that most people don't have. It's hard, and it's hard for people to fathom what having a twin is even like. But it's obviously there are some things that annoy you about having a twin, but there are definitely more goods than bads, and having a workout partner every day is one of those goods.
Let's get into you two, because this is going to be the first year now you guys aren't going to be together. And we're talking about that in a second, but just growing up now, like you said, you have someone that's your exact age still. Both of you guys have kind of achieved the same kind of dream of playing basketball at the next level. So what was that like, just being able to compete with someone day in, day out in your life, 24/7? What was that like?
It's indescribable. Like that's kind of what I mean about like people not really knowing unless you have it, just because like you can think about it and be like, oh, having a twin every day, like having someone every day, that'd be awesome. But until you actually do it, like I'm kind of figuring out now how important it was. Just like even getting up in the morning, like so we would usually go to the gym early mornings, right? Like, and we're going 2 or 3 times a day. But obviously it's not easy every day. Like if someone says that, they're probably lying to you, right? Like not everyone is getting up at 5:30 on their own. But having a twin is like, if I don't want to go to the gym one day and he does, then we're going to the gym. And if it's vice versa, So, and then once we're there, like I can't tell you how many times a game of one-on-one ended in like a ball being thrown at one another and then leaving the gym on that note. And obviously like in the moment, it's not great, but you look back on it and it's just like, we're both super competitive and I think we fuel each other. And like, I also tell people we wouldn't, like when people ask why we split, I kind of tell them like, we wouldn't be here without each other. Like that's no doubt about that. But at the same time, I think there's lots of opportunity for growth when we're not together. And I think I felt that the latter half of last season. And I think we're kind of at peace with that decision, which is why we ultimately made that. So
look at the hundreds of one-on-one games you guys have played before. Which one would you say got the most violent and most out of control?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask who won the most. I was already going to be. Which one got the most? There's one that comes. I don't know if I can go into too big a detail. There were, like, we've only gotten in one, like, fist fight. And the funny thing is, it happened last spring during quarantine. That's probably part of it, too. Like, we're all together all the time, even more so than we were before. And it happened so Will Cheddar is one of my best friends. He's going to Michigan next year. And he had an outdoor court and was gone for the weekend, but we were still over there working out. So it happened at his house. Will, if you're watching this, I never told you that we fought at your house, but it happened. So that's probably the one that got most out of control, but it doesn't happen too often.
You already kind of answered the next question, but when you guys do play one-on-one, who's won the majority of your guys' games?
There was just a stretch when we were like I was still bigger than he was, and now it's like I guess it's karma because he's bigger than I am now by like 2 inches. But there was a stretch from like 6th grade to 7th grade where he like I swear I won every time. Um, but he probably evened it out eventually. I'm telling you that it is very even, especially once like if you're counting just high school, like it's probably like 50-50. I literally can't. I know our games are just so different, so it's probably about 50. I can't pick a winner.
So if you guys are going to go play right now a game of 2-11 and you're going to play for a series of 3, who's going to win that series?
Man, I mean, I'd be stupid and not go with myself. I would say myself. He can't score on me. I'll lock him up. I know every move. I'm telling you right now. Like if we ever play Utah, I'm clamping that. Sorry, Gabe.
And that kind of leads to the next part too, because you guys are now going to be separated for the very first time in your guys' life. I know you've already got back on campus working out, so you've already kind of seen what it's going to be like a little bit. But how have you adjusted to that?
Yeah, it's definitely been different. But I mean, I think so. He had opted out in end of December last year, which I think prepared me a little more for this year, just because he went home at that point. So just experiencing life a lot. I'm telling like life on the court is probably easy. Like it's just different off the court, because we would room together. And so that's probably harder now, just not having someone you've had your whole life, like the off the court stuff. But the on the court stuff, I think, like for both of us, I think our part of it last year is like we hated guarding each other just because it's like you put 2 white guys on the floor, they're probably going to guard each other, and then make it like we're brothers too. So now we're probably even more going to guard each other. And then it's like if one of us locks the other one up, it makes him look bad, and like I don't want that for him. So I think like getting to college and experiencing that was different than in high school, just because like you're competing for minutes, and it's just different once you're in college, So I think it's a little refreshing at the same time, but it's definitely hard off the court at times too. So.
And if that day ever does come, I know you guys aren't in the same conference, so it's going to have to line up their tournament or out of conference scheduling, or even the official tournament NCAA March Madness time. But if you guys do end up playing Cincinnati versus Utah, what's that game going to be like?
Man, I mean, selfishly, I would hope it's somewhere in the middle. Like maybe they put it in Minnesota or something, and we can play in front of a home crowd. But that would be pretty cool. I mean, it'd be special. Just like even last year, we didn't get a chance to step on the floor together. Which we thought we would, just because I was hurt the first 8 games, and by the time I came back, he'd opted out. So if that never happens, like it'd be a little bit of a gut punch, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Hopefully, somewhere down the road that happens, because that'd be pretty cool. So.
Now, in terms of the brotherly rivalry to a degree, are you guys going to be trash talking each other? You guys are not going to talk much? Like, how's it going to look like on the court from a media or a fan's perspective?
I'm going to tell you right now, I'm the one that talks way more than he does. So that's what leads to most of our fights, because he's really easygoing, but sometimes I let him have it a little bit. So I'll probably go a little easy on him. I don't know. Because I love him. But no, if there's any talking, it's probably going to be done on my part. But if he gets a couple buckets, he'll probably shut that up pretty quick. So.
Another unique piece to you guys in your career has been having your dad coach you guys throughout high school. And I was at 2 different schools, Chelsea. You guys moved out to Mayo, which we'll talk about second, out of Minnesota later on. But just having him involved in your life where he's able to mentor you as the dad role, coach role, how big was that for you?
Man, it's special. I think like the last memory I have of him coaching is like, it's a hard pill to swallow, just because so he had never been to state, and he's been a head coach for 21 years. And it's not like, I'll still tell, and it's like, it seems biased coming from me, but like, honestly, he's one of the best basketball minds I've been around. And like, I definitely wouldn't be here without him. But the fact that, so we were 1 game away from state, and like on the day of the game, it got canceled because of COVID. And so that's just a hard pill to swallow. But like that day in the locker room, even our last game that we had played, we beat our crosstown rival in the section semi. And that's like at the same time that it's a hard pill to swallow, it's also like a pretty cool memory to have as the last game, just because like that feeling walking off the floor, giving him a hug, and the feeling in the locker room was pretty cool. But no, like yeah, like I said, like it's hard to describe just because like not many people get to, like I've done a lot of things that not many people get to experience. And I think like me and you talking right now I'm realizing that kind of, but just, yeah, having someone that understands you more than anyone else, and um, having him coach me for all 4 years. And even before that, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
I know it's kind of difficult because there are not too many of those. A handful of guys that have got to be coached by the dad, a couple in college, a couple of more in high school. But when that does happen, it's sometimes tough to kind of balance the two different roles. Obviously, a dad is a much different role than a coach. So, how did you guys kind of switch around that, and how did you guys kind of handle that in terms of a dad role and then also being a coach role at times?
I think he got a lot better at it as the years went on, because obviously, like when we came in as freshmen, um, like he'd never experienced that before. Like he'd never coached his kids. So I think there's a learning curve kind of that goes on for both of us. But I think, especially by my senior year, when we kind of got things rolling, we're really good. I think even when there was a bad day, it never leaked into, or never leaked off the court, you know, into stuff at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of a testament to him, just because I think he's a very self-aware person. So he's conscious of that stuff, which I'm grateful for, just because there were definitely some days where you don't want to, like, that's the last thing you want to do is go home and talk basketball. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But no, he, especially by the end, was really good at it. And that, like I said, that's a testament to him. So
Let's hop into that freshman season. You guys started out at Bloomer in Wisconsin. What was that first year like for you in high school?
man, so the experience at Bloomer, like I wouldn't trade it just because I am where I am. It was just different, you know, like just a different level of basketball, obviously. Like, so I'll tell people now, like, that's probably one of the worst conferences in Wisconsin looking back at it, you know, and like it was, some days it just wasn't fun, you know, like Gabe had like a game where he had 13 threes and had 51, and we beat a team like 106-35. And it's like days like you go home and you don't feel great, you know, because it's like I question, like, am I getting better? What am I getting out of this? So you just kind of wait around for AAU season. Mm-hmm. But there's definitely positives to take too. But yeah, overall, and okay, I'm gonna tell you right now, that's the reason I wear 45 is because of the level of disrespect I felt. So after the season, like they come out with all conference awards, all that. And like I got ranked 9th in the conference, and like people would be like, okay, as a freshman, that's decent. But then just from my perspective, like I'm telling you now, like this is like the worst conference in Wisconsin. I'm like, there's not 8 people better than me, you know? And so that's why I would wear 9 if I could, but I got to wear 45 because 4 + 5 = 9. So in case anyone's wondering, that's why. But yeah, I mean, like I said, like there's definitely stuff to take from it, but at the same time, I remember feeling a little bit like, what am I getting out of this completely? And it wasn't even the reason we moved, but it definitely was a benefit that we reaped from moving, was the level of play increasing.
You brought up earlier about the whole prep scenario, and that is something that I think it's just going to grow more and more, because I think ultimately you look at it, you get to go against a natural schedule, you get to go travel. Sometimes guys get to live on their own, prepares you for college aspect, competing day in, day out practice. Like there's a lot of benefits to taking that route for guys. So was that ever something that you guys considered? Like, did you ever look at going to one of these prep schools or some form of just national schedules? Like, did you ever look into any of that ever?
It wasn't something like I can't remember ever having a conversation about it. And maybe just for us, like obviously it comes up, like you talk about this guy going prep, or it's not like I wasn't aware of it, but I think, and thinking back on it, I don't know exactly the reason. Like maybe there just wasn't a need, and I liked the high school experience. I liked everything outside of basketball about high school, you know, and kind of putting on for your hometown a little bit. And maybe even the fact that my dad was my coach too, like maybe that's a reason. But no, it's not something we ever discussed. But and maybe it, like even then I might have been oblivious to the fact like how many people go that route, you know, and I just kind of felt like there was no need, because I was getting enough attention. Like the attention wasn't crazy, but like by the end of, like I think it all worked out, you know. And I think I felt like AAU was enough to kind of get my name out there.
You then move out to Minnesota, which we spend your final 3 years of high school out at. So what led to that? Was that also a family move because of your parents having jobs? Was it just you guys want to move for basketball? Like what caused that move to come to Minnesota then?
Yeah, so it was mostly for my parents' profession. Just my dad had been in the admin role and wanted to just kind of get us into a bigger city a little bit. And so it was kind of both for my parents' jobs, which my mom worked at Austin Middle School, which is like 30 minutes away from Rochester. And then my dad worked at Mayo High School and was the basketball coach. I think more so it was probably the biggest reason was just the diversity piece. Just so we're coming from Bloomer, which is probably the least diverse place in the country. And having had the experiences I had had prior, just living in China and experiencing of everything else, I think that's probably a part of it too, was just the fact they wanted us to experience more. And Mayo's super diverse. And part of it is like the Mayo Clinic is right there. So there's just people from all over the world that live right in Rochester, and it's a good sized city, like 200,000. So I think that's probably the biggest reason why, thinking back on it.
Now, going back before you came into high school, if someone would have told you that you're eventually going to become a guy that gets ranked, I mean, that probably wasn't the best thing what you wanted, but you still got your name in 247. You still were a guy that people wanted to have come to the college, many offers on the table. Like, could you have seen that happening down the road by the time you're a senior?
I think so. And it might sound a little arrogant, but I just like knowing the way I work, like even now, I think like the most important thing for young players is like how you approach the game. And like you said, like maybe I'm like, even now I'll tell you, I'm not thrilled with where I ended, but that's kind of what keeps me going every day. Just because I know like work kind of wins out when it comes to basketball. Like you can't really cheat the grind unless you're just a freak. Like obviously there's some of those scenarios, but I think in the long run, like basketball is just one of those games that favors guys who do it the right way and put the most time in and approach the game in a way that other people won't. And so, like I said, like I think I would have believed you just because like I knew how I worked then, and like it was. And the biggest thing too was consistency. Like it didn't waver ever, like since I was in 5th grade, it's kind of been the same routine every day. Because there weren't many 5th graders getting up at 5:30 before school, and dribbling in the basement or going outside, cutting the fingers off mittens, stuff like that. So I probably would have believed you. But at the same time, like I still say like it's a little surreal every day. Like I'm not used, like there's some stuff you'll never get used to, that come with playing at this level. So it's pretty cool.
That sophomore year, you guys have not necessarily the best year compared to your upperclassmen years, but right around 500 as a team. Take us to that sophomore season, what that was like.
It was an adjustment. I think that's the best word I can give you, just because it was a different level of basketball than I was used to. So like I said earlier, like Matthew Hurt went to Duke and is going to be a first or second round. I don't even know where he is in the mock drafts. But I told people all along, like Matthew is going to like succeed in the league just because he's 6'10" and can shoot. Like he's still the best high school player I've ever played against, and probably top 5 that I've seen live. But it was like, I guess my point. So like our second game was against JM, like our crosstown rival, and we go in all hyped up and get blown out by 30. That's the first time I've been blown out. And so I guess it was kind of a wake up call a little bit, like, oh, this is like big boy basketball a little bit. And so that whole year was just kind of, it's like we didn't have the most skilled dudes at that point, because by the end, we kind of had the same team for like 3 years a little bit. So those younger guys grew older, and then just like you keep the same core a little bit. But just like it was still like the best scenario. Like it was an egoless team. So obviously, like being a dude that comes in and takes lots of minutes, like there can sometimes be animosity, but it was kind of the perfect setup. Even though we weren't great that year, it was probably one of the more enjoyable years I've had.
You said earlier that transition heading into sophomore year was really where you truly felt like, okay, this is truly my passion. I see what I want to do. I'd hopefully try making the next level. So how much did that help you? And like, was that truly like the point that you did lock in and truly start saying, okay, this is really what I want to do?
Yeah, I think so. And part of the reason, like I had mentioned before, just having the like different resources. So like in Wisconsin, it was like I go to the gym, kind of do the same stuff day in, day out. And obviously, like, you're picking up stuff, like I'm watching YouTube videos or seeing stuff on Instagram or Twitter and maybe adding that to a workout once in a while. But like once you see the lens or you look out, like you see life through a different person's lens, it kind of changes things. And so like when I started working with Dale and Dino, the two dudes who I still work with every time I go out, and I think Dino is coming out here, David Norris. So he had played, he's from California originally and played at Sac State. And then made his way to Rochester. But just as kind of like he epitomizes what like Rochester youth basketball is all about, and it's kind of synonymous with Rochester basketball. So everyone in Rochester knows him. So like when I was introduced to him super early on, and that's kind of when I started working out differently. And my game just kind of changed. Became a little more shifty. Just learned like footwork stuff, just like little things that kind of separate you that like you're in the gym by yourself and you're not thinking about stuff like that, but you get another set of eyes on you and it just kind of changes. So I think seeing like progress in my game at that point, it just makes you appreciate it a little more. And you're like, oh shoot, like there's nothing better than seeing progress in yourself, And I even said that today to someone in the weight room, like there's no better feeling than seeing your body change in the weight room, But it's the same thing with basketball. So when I felt that and I felt like I was getting better, it just makes you want to go more and more. So
the junior season then became your best statistical season. As a teen, you were still pretty solid, but you jumped to 22 points a game, 6 rebounds, 5 assists. What led to that breakout in your junior year?
The fact that I could shoot it finally. So my which is probably hard for some people to believe just because like I didn't shoot it great last year. But I think like a lower amount of reps or lower amount of shots during the year, and then you have a couple bad games, like it just kind of drags that percentage down. But I think I would put myself against any shooter in the country now, But at the time, I'm kind of coming off a year where I'm shooting. I don't even remember what my sophomore year was, like 32%. The year before I was like 31. And so I just always struggled. And I couldn't figure out what was wrong with my shot. And I'm just like like I beat myself up over stuff like that. Like I want to be the best at something if I'm going to do it. And I could never figure it out. And then I just kind of had this breakthrough. One night late in a gym, like in our middle, I still remember it because it was like the best day of my life where I like figured my shot out and the lights were off at this middle school gym. Like we couldn't get in the high school for some reason. And like the rim might not even be 10 feet there, but I figured it out. And so when I turned that corner, it just kind of opened up everything. Cause like you look at the game of basketball now and shooting is at an all-time high. Like the premium is so high on it. And it's valued so much more than it used to be. And so I think that just opens up a lot of things. And then that's probably why my junior year was my best statistical season when it comes to that, just because I could finally shoot. So I credit my shooting completely for my junior year breakthrough.
The senior year then obviously didn't end the way, as you said earlier, probably the way you guys could have wanted to with COVID coming into factor. But you guys as a team have your best season, 21-5, incredible season that obviously lines you up to possibly go for a state championship run. You averaged 20 points a game, almost 6 rebounds, 5 assists. What was that senior year like?
I'm going to tell you right now, I might never have a more enjoyable year in my life. And it probably has less to do with our success on the court than it does like with all my like teammates. Like that's going to be the closest team I'm for as long as I play. Like I'll be on a lot of close teams. That'll probably be the closest team I'll ever play on. Just like top to bottom, the way everyone got along. And like we had 9 seniors on that team, which is unheard of. But and like I'm just so like that's one thing that I'll forever be proud of, just the way like we kind of changed the culture at Mayo. And the way like just watching how the younger kids wanted to get in the gym after that. And the way like we just kind of impacted people. Like it's pretty cool to think back on, but like the success on the court was kind of a byproduct of all that, like there's so much more that went into it that people don't realize. And then you see the 21-5, you're like, wow, that's really good. But it was so much more about the process of getting there than it was about the results. So
you look back at all 4 years of high school. What's your favorite memory?
Yeah. Okay, I'll do one off the court. So like I used to I always said I was going to pull my name from like the homecoming court selection and all this stuff. And like just because I felt like at a smaller school, it was more about like popularity and like I'm not huge into that. And so I went and talked to like my senior year because I kind of had a feeling like maybe I'll get picked. I don't know, for homecoming king. And like I felt weird about it. So I went and talked to the guy who ran it, one of our teachers, and he just gave me all these reasons, like, listen, like I respect your decision if that's what you do, but it's so much more than that. And so I didn't end up doing it. I ended up getting picked for homecoming king. But it was just like one of the most fun experiences I've had because it was less about like getting paid and more about like just being around everyone else who was on court and just all the activities that came with it. Like that week of high school was really fun. And then I think on the court, like there's one for sure. So like in our last game that I talked about, we played Rochester Century, and like my last bucket was a dunk at the end of the game, like to seal it. So like they're really good, and we came out and just kind of handled them from beginning to end, and like I had a dunk to cap it off. And it was just like the most lit experience I've ever had in my life. Like I just remember yelling after I had the dunk, and then I go chest bump Gabe, and everyone's going crazy. That is definitely the high point. And then in the locker room after was awesome too. People spraying water everywhere. But that's just the cool thing about high school basketball is like there's not much like it. Like obviously there were cool experiences this year, and I'm sure if we go to the Final Four, there's nothing better than that. Like I'm sure that'll be my high, or even beating Wichita State this year. Like that's probably my high now too. But high school basketball is just different, just because you do it with your friends since you were little. So
you wrap up with over 2,000 career points. You have a 3-star to your name, a top 500 guy, and you and your brother both decide to ultimately choose to go out to Cincinnati, commit there. So take us to that recruiting process. Like, how did Cincinnati win you over? Why was that the program that you guys ultimately decided to go commit to?
It was a stressful process. Like thinking back on it, just because we didn't know what the right choice was going to be. Like, do we go together? Do we not? Because obviously we talked about not going together and just everything that, and there's just no way of knowing, you know? So then when we got to the point, like, and it made it harder too, because Gabe was a little higher recruiter than me. So he had better offers by the end. And so I know it was probably harder for him too. And even talking to him after when he was struggling, you know, like that's part of kind of what ate at him. But I think that like it's just so weird now thinking back on it, just because we committed to a different staff and things didn't go as we had planned. So it's like a hard question to answer. Just, and now I feel like everything worked out how it was supposed to. And I'm not necessarily one of those people that believes everything happens for a reason, but I feel like this like happened for a reason. So I think at the time it was just like the chance to play in Cincinnati, like at a historic program for like a crazy fan base. Like I'm gonna tell you right now, like I don't know if I could have said that before I committed. Like I just kind of felt, well, this has to be the best fan base in the country. Like, and especially for how many people are in the city. Like it's not an overly huge city, but it's like the fan base is crazy, you know. Which I'm excited to experience this year because it was just a little different last year. But I think just that a combination of all those things, you know, like being able to challenge ourselves at like the highest level in basketball, which like you look at the top teams in them, like Houston just came off a Final Four run, Memphis really good, SMU and Wichita State both really good. So I think the American is one of the better conferences in basketball for sure. And I think a combination of all those things probably led to both of us committing in the first place.
When you remember back, was the number 2 option? Had Cincinnati not come into the picture, where would you probably have ended up at?
Man, I think so. It's like I didn't have many other high majors, so Xavier came in late at the end. But if I were to have gone anywhere else, it probably would have been Toledo, which is weird because it's not that far away from here. But they're just like I'll never say anything bad about Coach Kowalczyk just because I like the way they run their program is he does it the right way, I think. And even watching them this year, like they ended up in the NIT, but like the style of play is like exactly what I was looking for. And so if Cincinnati had never come, I think me and Gabe would probably be in different places at the beginning, which is crazy to think about because it was like our last offer kind of and happened right at the end of that NCAA period, that camp that was end of July, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Toledo's probably there, or either Northern Iowa or Toledo, just because like I really love the coaching staff in Northern Iowa too, and it was close to home. But probably one of those two places.
Let's get into this freshman season, and obviously had a lot of ups and downs for anybody in any situation just because of the COVID pandemic, shutdowns, and everything. And you guys also had a crazy ending there at the end of the season we'll talk about in a little bit. But just heading into this freshman year, you guys have all these protocols, not able to get on campus necessarily on time, not working out the way typical would happen, all the masks, the tests, like everything's going crazy for you as a freshman. How did you get adjusted to this hectic COVID time period?
Man, it was hard. Like thinking back on it, like, and now experiencing what it's supposed to be like, it's like that was my only experience last year. So maybe it was like easier for me than it was for other people, just because that was my only experience. So I'm like, oh, this isn't too bad. But it was definitely just different. I think that's the best word for it. Or maybe hard is the best word. Hard probably is. It was, I don't know. It's like, so everything was outside for a while. Like when we would lift, it would be on the turf. And just now experiencing it, it's not at all how it is. So I can see why like some of the upperclassmen felt the way they felt. But at that time, I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like we're at Nippert out on the stadium. Like we're living the life. But definitely as the days went on, it started to wear. And then just like, I think if you didn't go through it, this is kind of my answer for a lot of things. I feel like I've said this before, but if you didn't go through it, it's hard to explain just because, like it was just so isolated. Like there are so many things we couldn't do and obviously there's a lot of people probably felt that way too, especially if you're in college basketball. But it was just like, when I tell you it was just back and forth from the gym and home, like that's exactly what it was. You know, like we're not even really going into grocery stores, and we're definitely not doing anything fun outside of, you know, just because at that point, most places are shut down. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was hard. And I think it'll make this year even more enjoyable and probably easier, just because it probably got as bad as it can get, you know, and I just happened to be a freshman at that point. But
it even was harder for you too, because you missed the first 8 games with an injury. How are you
able
to bounce back from that? Like, walk us through the injury aspect, when that happened, how it occurred, and how you ultimately came back from that to be able to come in and be key piece of rotation by the end of the year.
Man, so I'm like a guy that's never missed a game because of injury. And then so it happened right before the season started. So we had a couple like inter squad scrimmages. So I think we were going to have 3 total. And so we had 2. And then that week in practice, me and my roommate, like, were in this one-on-one drill in practice. And like, we just kind of got tangled up and I went down wrong. And I kind of knew right away. So it ended up with like, it was just like a high ankle sprain and an injury to my Achilles. Mm-hmm. But I knew right away, like something was like, I've sprained my ankle plenty of times and like, I'll walk off on it and probably take a couple of days. But like that one, it's like, I could not really put weight on it. And then I tried to rush back. So we had like our big inter squad scrimmage where like we wear the jerseys and we play at Fifth Third, and like they bring in real refs and, you know, like it's the whole shebang kind of. And so I wanted to play in that. And I think the injury happened like Monday, and I took Tuesday, Wednesday off, practiced a little Thursday, and then played Friday in that scrimmage. And like looking back, I just took a pill and I shouldn't have, just because it like numbed the pain. I'm like feeling really good dunking in warm-ups. And then it probably got worse because of that, you know? But like, and that's one of those injuries, like you can't rush it back. So I tried, and then I just decided, like, if I'm going to be have any type of success throughout the year, I'm going to have to shut it down. And so like that, I think as the days wore on, it became harder and harder, you know, just because like you miss the first game and everyone else is out there and you're in a boot on the sideline. And then you miss the second game was Xavier. And like that game is huge, no matter if there's fans in the stands or not. Like the energy in the building was just different. So I haven't even gotten a chance to play in the crosstown shootout yet. And then eventually, and like I said, like when Gabe left, it became even harder because all that stuff is going on. Like I haven't played a game yet. And now my brother's gone. And so there's a lot, like it was hard mentally. I think that was probably the hardest part, was mentally. Like I can stand the physical pain, but the mental stuff was probably harder. but then it probably made everything more rewarding at the end. So like coming in, I still remember like, so my first game back was SMU and we were away. And I remember getting to the game, like I didn't expect to play at all, like coming off an injury. It's like, and like I really shouldn't have played that game, but we got down big and Coach B got mad at everyone. I was like, Mason, get in there. I was like, wait a second. I'm just chewing gum on the side. I was like, wait a second. I was sitting kind of at the end of the bench. He said, Mason. So I go check in. And then he calls a play for me first time in. And I think it was my first, I think my second touch because I got the ball, got rid of it. And then I got a double pin down and made my first shot. So that's something I'll always remember too. But no, I think it made everything more rewarding in the end, even though like I hate to think about that whole month of December pretty much, how hard that was. But
there's two games specifically I want to go into. One against East Carolina. You ended up having 19 points. That was your best game of your freshman season. Take us to that game. Like what allowed you to break out and have a 19 point, 6 rebound, 3 assist night?
Like the whole flow of the game was kind of weird because it was close for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And like I had a couple makes in a row early in the game. And then I can't remember if like we must have had someone hurt or people in foul trouble because there were a lot of minutes available. Like I remember that. And I think Dave still wasn't back. Like he had opted out. I can't remember if that's correct or not. I think it's got to be correct because there were a lot of minutes. Mm-hmm. But yeah. And then like it's weird because like kind of till the end of the game, I think I was sitting at like 11. And like the only reason I know this is because I know what happened the next couple of possessions. But like there's like 2 minutes left. And I'm kind of standing in the corner and I turn to our assistant and I'm just kind of joking. And I'm like, watch this. I'm going to pad my stats quick. And obviously I'm joking. But then I like get the ball and come off the ball screen and pull and made it. And then hit another one and made it. And then I got fouled and all of a sudden I'm at 19 and it's close to a 20 ball. I'm like, shoot, that looks good in the stat sheet. But that game was cool too, just because there was a good lob play to Tari that should have been top 10 Sports Centers. You got to put some respect on her name. But no, that was a fun game. I think to break out like that was definitely rewarding. So.
Now, this kind of sidetracks a little bit. Obviously, Tari decided not only to transfer, he's also going out to LSU now. And he's someone I'm pretty high on, but how special do you think he's going to be and what exactly is LSU getting in Tari Eason?
I'm going to tell you right now, like Tari's ceiling is whatever he wants it to be. Mm-hmm. Just because he like already, and like he'll flourish in a system like that too, where they just kind of let him go be him. Because I think people don't really know how good Tari is. Like you saw flashes, but like I see it every day, and Tari's just a really good dude too, and that'll take you a lot of places. That'll take you further than a lot of things. And that's probably the most important thing, He thinks super deeply about a lot of things, which is his best quality, I think, like personally. Like he's a critical thinker and is super opinionated, which will serve him well in the future. But as far as on the court, it's like people will see it next year. Like he'll do a lot of really good things. Like if he works the way I think he's going to work over this next year, he'll probably be at LSU for 1 year, just because like his body is an NBA body, and then you get the skill set up there too, and the sky's the limit.
Well, another big breakout game for you guys came during the tournament stretch. You guys go against the number 1 seed. I think you guys went at 5, I believe, and then you guys go out there, upset Wichita State. A huge game. You have a 10-point outing that night too. Take us to that game and just how exciting that was. Not only upset them, but for you also be a huge piece in that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool thinking back on it. It's like a game like that makes me like even more excited for fans, just because I know how it would have been if there were fans, like if it was full capacity. But like I think I said it earlier, like that probably overtook that final dunk my high school season, like as an all-time high. Mm-hmm. Just like when Gilbert missed that shot at the end, like and winning and like knowing, obviously that's before we go to get blown out against Houston, but like in that moment, it just like that's an all-time high. And knowing that like we probably don't win that game if I don't hit a couple shots, it's also a rewarding feeling, and it makes everything feel worth it, because there are definitely some days you question like, why am I doing this? And then a game like that is like, you're like, that's why, you know. So no, that was pretty cool. And just to like have my number called a couple times down the stretch too, like where like Coach B kind of let me call a couple plays for myself. It's pretty cool. Something I probably didn't foresee happening before the year started. But it's just kind of how the cookie crumbled a little bit. So it was pretty cool.
Obviously, from that point, which was, like you said, the highest of your career, probably, things obviously went crazy after that. Then you guys ultimately head into this offseason time, and we know everything with Coach B happens and all that goes down. But from like a media perspective, I think most fans too, like they saw this team that was pretty young. Obviously, majority of the team had a chance of coming back had they not want to transfer or whatnot. And you guys had a lot of young guys like you and Mike really kind of showed through on the very end of the season. Tari just had a huge outing for most of the year. A lot of the guys just had great flashes too. You guys have the upsetting for the state. You guys go to the championship, and what happens in Houston happens, but they're an elite team. So how did this all go down? Like, what all happened? Were you shocked by Coach B being let go? Did you know about all this stuff? Like, just take us through how you personally, as a player in this locker room, took it all.
Yeah, there's just so much there. I kind of knew. So after the season, I kind of knew where everyone's head was at, and so that's why it even amazes me that like we had made it that far. I think that's a testament to how close we were as a team. Just because there was some, I don't know what the right word, maybe not animosity. There's just a little, maybe tension throughout the whole year. And like, there's a lot of articles out there, and like, I'm gonna just go on the record right now and say none of those articles are me. Like I've never talked to anyone about that, so that's why I just feel like weird saying everything now. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff, and I think like when one person, so like we had talked about it a little bit here and there. It's like, what are you doing next season? What are you doing next season? That kind of thing. Just because like we knew the rule was going to be different too, and obviously ultimately, clearly people didn't really want to leave unless. Like there were a couple guys, but I think when one person went in, it just kind of got the ball rolling a little bit, and then everyone kind of went in, and like I said, now like I think things worked out how they're supposed to. Just like the reason I went in is because there was just so much uncertainty, and I had so many hard conversations because it's like my thing with transferring. And like, obviously I don't think this about anyone who transfers, but like personally, I just felt like I don't want to quit anything, like I had committed, I don't want to quit. But at the same time, it's like, there's so much uncertainty. I don't want to be left in a bad situation. And there was just so much uncertainty at the time. And so like, I had so many conversations with my dad. That was the hardest day, probably one of the harder days of my life, where I had to like make that decision ultimately to put my name in the portal. And obviously I ended up coming back, and I'm extremely grateful because there's no place I'd rather be. But yeah, that was just a hard time overall, just because I think like we all love playing together. It just wasn't in the cards at that point. So
you mentioned the tension. So was that tension between the teammates and the locker room, like your guys' chemistry? Was it with you guys and coach? Was it with the university and coach? Like, where was the tension within that locker room or within that situation?
yeah, I think I think it wasn't player to player. It was probably mostly just a little disconnect between player and coach, which is probably why the university decided to move on. But yeah, I think like no, that's one of the huge reasons I came back, is just because I love my teammates so much, and they all know that. Like I had lots of talks before. Like those were some of the talks I'd had were with my teammates. Just kind of telling like I don't want to do this, but I got to put myself in the best situation. So no, like I said, like I think the university kind of felt it was best to move on, just because there was that disconnect between player and coach. And I'm not going to speak poorly of anyone, like I don't want to do that. So I will leave it at that.
And so then we know, like you said, you go in the transfer portal and you just came off a pretty solid freshman season. Every coach kind of knows that there are obstacles with COVID too. So I can imagine there was a lot of interest out there for you. So what did that look like when you were just sitting in that portal before Coach Miller came in? We'll discuss that situation in a second. But like, what were the initial schools that were really heavily pursuing you?
Yeah, so like I had told you before, so obviously Toledo and Northern Iowa got on right away, just because like I had really good relationships before. But when it came down to it, so like for a while my top 5 was like St. Louis, which is obviously a good opportunity. New Mexico, which I'd like taken a trip out. So like my mom, we road trip all the time, and then we were going to road trip anyway for spring break. And then when I went in the portal, we just kind of altered the route a little bit, and so we headed out to New Mexico, which was so far. Well, I can't remember how. Like I think like 18 hours or something. And so we made our way out there. I went with one of my friends. And so we visited the pit, which was really cool. Like we got to experience all this stuff, and we stopped in St. Louis along the way. And then also Butler, along with Toledo in Northern Iowa. So when it came down to it, it was probably like the last phone call I had to make was telling Butler no, which we were going to have a Zoom that day. And like that's just a great opportunity, just because obviously like Butler's super historic and it's in the Big East, and like as a guard, I feel like if you want to play at the highest level, like the Big East is the highest level guard conference in basketball, I think. So that was a really hard one to say no to, but I think it just shows how much I wanted to be here, because I canceled the Zoom early that morning because I had to talk with Coach Miller. So this is like right when Coach Miller got hired. I had to talk with him, a couple talks, and he was just like, if you're all in, like you, and at that point I kind of knew I was coming back, and he's just like, if you're all in, I wouldn't waste their time. And so I had called them that night or early that morning and kind of told them no.
I'm pretty close with Mike, so I kind of knew his situation. He was going to commit originally on a certain day. I think it was that Friday or something like that. And obviously then they hired Coach Miller, and he decides to come back eventually too. So how close were you, though? If they waited, like, per se, another week to hire Coach Miller, do you think you still would be at Cincinnati?
I don't – man, that's a hard question to answer just because – so, like, my timeline – like, if I had to go out on a limb, I would say probably not. I probably wouldn't be here. Which is, like, everything – that's why I say everything – like, this situation specifically, I think everything worked out exactly how it was supposed to, just because, like Mike said – because they kind of kept us in the loop a little bit. Just because they wanted us to stay, and we're like, listen, like we know you guys have a timeline. Just give us a couple days. And I think Mr. Cunningham, our AD, did a really good job moving quickly and finding the best available person. Because I'm gonna tell you right now, like I didn't even know Coach. I had no previous connection to Coach Miller, and then they hired him, and instantly, like I told him, like now I'll tell him, like he did everything right when it came to that, just because like he had his press conference and referred to Xavier as the other team, and then posted about Skyline, which is huge in Cincinnati. So he just did all the right things to get fans on board, and I guess he did the right thing to get players on board too.
That's what I was going to ask you next. And so how did he win you over? Obviously, Mike has his own story too, to a degree, but like, what was your story? Like, you are a guy that now has all these opportunities to even go to higher conferences, and this was, I guess he kind of has a little bit of pull too, because like you said, we're just that history. You just want to be back, kind of create that legacy there. But like, how did he ultimately win you over in such a short span?
Man, like he's just one of the most genuine dudes I've been around. Like I felt it instantly, and like obviously part of you wonders like, how real is this? And like he even said this to me. Like, I think we kind of wondered that about each other, which is, and now he'll always say, like, takes one to know one when it comes to me and him, because he feels like we're very similar in a lot of ways. But, like, he had thought that about my work ethic. He's like, is this guy just in the gym because I just got hired? He wants to prove something to me. And I kind of felt like, is he just telling me what he wants me to hear? But, like, it just felt so real, you know? And, like, the thing I said to him in our first conversation, I just told him, like, listen, man, I don't want to be like the white shooter, just because I feel like, you know, like a lot, obviously that's kind of the elephant in the room for a lot of white guys. It's like, oh, this guy's the shooter, you know? And like, I feel like I'm so much more than that. And so I kind of said that to him right away. I'm like, listen, I know there's lots of places I could go, and that's not the case. And so that's one of the first conversations we had. And he's just like, listen, man, I know exactly what you mean, because I was the white shooter. He's like, I don't see that for you at all. And then we just had a couple conversations that went really well. And it's like, he's not telling me what I want to hear because he's the one that talked first, but it's everything I wanted to hear, you know? So it's like, I'm not prefacing anything, but he's telling me exactly what I want to hear. And I'm like, okay, this is so perfect, you know? And at that point I'm like, yeah, this is the right dude. This is the dude I want to play for.
Well, you now have got about 2 or 3 weeks now. I'm not sure exactly what it is of you being on campus now. So you kind of got experience a little bit of what this could look like. Obviously not the real thing yet, but it's a pretty good idea. Also, you're adding in now. You got Odie coming in. You got Abdul. You got Hayden, Jarrett, John, AJ. Like, the list goes on of different guys now joining this other core group of returners. So what do you like about the team so far? Like, how special is this team starting to look?
We're going to be really good. I'm going to just say that, and then we're going to back that up when the season comes around, because I'm not going to say much more. But like, just the dynamic of our team, like off the court, is really cool. Just because, like, obviously I said before, one of the main reasons I came back in the first place was because of my teammates that were already here. And then you add in dudes who I'm already super close with. So like Odie's literally right across the hall. Like, we room together now. And then just like everyone else too, like Jarrett, you went down the list, Jarrett, Hayden, Abdul, and then you bring, like, so John gets on campus later this week. And AJ's in that list too, like just all really good dudes. And I think Coach Miller he was just super conscious of that when he was putting together a team. Like, he'd always told me, like, listen, we're not going to bring in like all the best guys. We're going to bring in the right guys, because if like that's what you need to build a really good team. And I think at that point I'm like, yeah, this is going to be something special. And so obviously it's early on in the summer, and I think if you ask anyone, probably anyone will say what I just said. But I honestly believe it. And so I guess we'll see when the season rolls around. So
there's obviously going to be a lot of guys going to have big roles, but two guys that you already are familiar with I want to touch up on. One is Mike, and I think a lot of the country got to start seeing what could come from him more towards the end of the season there, because once he got that more minutes, he really came out showing really well as well. But how special is Mike, and what's the jump he's going to have this upcoming season?
Man, Mike, like, I didn't know. So like, we would always, when we worked out in the summer last summer, because they kind of had a split, so it was all the freshmen working out together. And like, I would see him run, and I always heard like coming in like, oh, this guy's the fastest dude in the country, all this stuff. And I was like, whatever, because I think I'm pretty fast. I'm like, I bet I can beat him a race. And so like, we would run on the turf, all this stuff. I think the thing you have to include with Mike is just his speed with the ball, just because it's different. Like, you can run without, lots of dudes can run without the ball, but Mike, you put a ball in his hands and it's like he's faster, and like that is very rare. And I think that's why he creates such a matchup problem for people. So I don't enjoy guarding him all the time in open gym, just because it's like, this dude is so fast, like, what he's going to do when he gets to the rim. And I think the thing about Mike too is he works really hard, and like, he wants to get better. And we had a lot of those talks before we ultimately both decided to come back. Like, listen, we got to do this together. Like, we're like going to be the two remaining dudes in our class. And obviously Victor is part of that too, but Victor didn't play a game last year. But like, just to have that bond with someone already is pretty special. And then, like I said, like, he works really hard. His shot's going to get there. And it already, like, people haven't seen Mike since like March. So like, he's made strides from March to June. And so to see what he'll do from June to October and November, I think people will be surprised when they see him again.
The big guy is probably going to be the go-to guy, if not one of the go-to guys in leaders, and that's Jeremiah. But also I'm super high. I think he's really underrated, especially in the AAC. So how special is he, and what can we expect from him this year?
Man, yeah, JD is just one of those dudes who, like, he's just about it, like, it's, some dudes just kind of have that switch they flip on, and he's like that dude. And like, for the longest time I didn't, so like, his energy when I first got here was crazy, like, it's like he has one speed, and it's just like all go. And I was like, is this genuine? And like, I'm gonna tell you right now, like, it is genuine. Like, he just has like this, he just kind of attracts people to him with his personality. And I think that's what makes him special. And then you can kind of see it show through on the court, like, he's very passionate. And then I think like, just being from Cincinnati, like, being a hometown kid adds to that. And, obviously he lost his dad earlier this year, and I think he's really motivated by that. And I don't think he needed any extra fuel, but I know that's what this season is for. And so he's one of those dudes that, like, if you didn't know about him last year, you're going to know about him next year, So yeah, the strides he's going to make will be night and day from last year too.
And the final one, someone I'm sure you're pretty close with, and that's yourself. So what's the jump you're going to be having this year? Like, what are you capable of, and what can we expect from Mason Madsen this upcoming season?
Yeah, I think I'd rather not do too much talking, but like if I'm gonna just say a little bit, I think like my mindset, it's just different when you're a sophomore. You know, like it's the hard thing about college is you go from being like the top dog in high school and you have kind of climbed the ranks a little bit and earned your stripes, and then you go to college and you start all over. And like this year, it's like I feel a little bit like a vet just because I was here last year. But I think the whole thing is like going to be a shift in mindset, and obviously, like my work ethic hasn't changed. Like I talked a little bit about that earlier, and so I'm in the gym 3 times a day, every day, sometimes more. And I think like obviously that'll bode well. And then just even an open gym shifting my mindset a little bit, like being that dude you can go to get a bucket, you know, like because that's what I want. So like I don't want to just be that shooter, you know. So I think I'm a 3-dimensional scorer, and I think you'll see more of that next year. And then obviously in Coach Miller's system, you got to D up. So you will also be seeing a lot of that.
Absolutely, man. Well, a couple more things before I let you go. One of which is I was like wrapping up discussing building a legacy for yourself. So when that day does come and you ultimately step away from this game someday, what do you want to be remembered for what you achieved both on and off the court?
Yeah, I think on the court, like obviously Kobe's at like this like ultra level when it comes to work ethic and the way he approached the game. But I think like as long as I play this game, I kind of want to be seen as a guy who like did it the right way, and just kind of earned everything he was given, you know. And I think, you know, like I talked to Coach Miller about it today, like just kind of that idea exactly. Like if you approach the game right, like things will come, you know, and you don't know exactly when they're going to come, but eventually they'll come. So you just stay patient, stay with the process. And I think that's the biggest thing, just being invested in the process. And like, we hear that a lot, like trust the process. But if you're worried about results, like that stuff will come. Like you just got to worry about staying in the moment. And I think, you know, like on the court, that's probably what I'll like, obviously. And if you do that, everything else takes care of itself. So like, I think when I think about my legacy, I think that's what I want it to be remembered as. And then off the court, just especially like, so obviously it depends on the area you're in, and like the higher the level, the bigger your platform. But I want to be, especially like my time in college, I just want to be a person who is in the community. I said this last year in my interview, like hopefully when COVID kind of settles down, which I think we're hopefully getting to that point soon, and we can start being out and about more. I can kind of show my face, because I think I'd kind of been an activist when it came to things when I was in Rochester, and I kind of foresee myself having the same role in Cincinnati, just because there are a lot of things I'm passionate about, and I want the best for the city, and I want to make a difference. And I think like having the platform I have, and like I said, hopefully it continues to grow. But I just want to go about things the right way. I think that's kind of the constant, both on and off the court. Like I just want to be seen as someone who does things the right way. So we'll see. When everything's said and done, hopefully people can say that about me.
Absolutely, man. Well, final thing for you, give Cincinnati fans your 3 biggest goals you have set for this upcoming season.
Ooh, 3 biggest goals. I think we'll start small. I think beating Houston, because obviously if you beat the top dog, I think obviously winning the conference, and then not only make the tournament, because Cincinnati fans are used to that. Like they're used to make, like that's the expectation. That's baseline stuff. We want to play in the second and third weekend, you know, and I think everyone will say their goal is Final Four. And like I said, like you live in the process, and you're an everyday guy, like stuff like that takes care of itself. But yeah, just know like that's what we're working for every day. You know, like we don't want to be the team that makes the tournament. We want to win in the tournament. Because like even though it's like only 68 teams make the tournament, like 68 teams make the tournament. So you want to be one of those 16 in the Sweet 16 or one of those 4 in the Final Four. So I think that's what we're working for, and I want all Cincinnati fans to know that.
Absolutely, man. Well, best of luck this upcoming season, man. I'm excited to see what Gal got next for you, and I appreciate you taking time to come on today, man.
Absolutely. Appreciate you, Zach.
Of course, man. You're always welcome on, my man. God bless.
All right, man. Yes, sir.